DealQuest listeners and viewers, I'm so excited to have Jessica Fialkovich coming on an upcoming episode of DealQuest. She is a phenomenal business broker and has had her own experience, doing her own deals. So, Jessica, talk to us a little bit about, what we're going to cover on your episode of DealQuest.
Yeah, we're going to talk a little bit about, the business brokerage industry and investment banking. We're going to talk a little bit too about what's going on in the marketplace, right? What are we seeing? And then also, how can you be successful in deals, whether you're a seller or you're a buyer?
And I think I'm going to hopefully get you to share a little bit about your own deal experience that led you to being a business broker. Yes? Will you share that?
Yeah, we could definitely cover that. We'll cover my deal journey, the sale of my first business, and then how I've grown my own business through acquisition as well.
And let me just, I'll tease a little preview here. Like I have a client who was in the same industry, and I thought he was smart, and I think Jessica's very, very smart, but I question their decision to sell the business in this particular industry. That's a joke. I'm a wine guy. It was in the wine industry. It's a joke.
Yeah, it's a good lifestyle. It's hard to abandon. But yes, we'll talk about my journey in the wine industry as well, and why I also made that crazy decision to sell.
Awesome. All right. So check out Jessica's episode coming up real soon. Do you want your business to grow faster? Are you open to new and out-of-the-box ways to drive revenues and increase value? How do you imagine the most successful entrepreneurs and business leaders double, triple, or expand their businesses tenfold or more? The answer is deals. This is a weekly podcast featuring conversations with business owners, executives, and leaders as we reveal behind-the-scenes details that give you, our listeners, the confidence to pursue your own deal-driven growth. On the show, we discuss a huge variety of deals, everything from large, complex mergers and acquisitions to smaller deals that you can do even without significant capital. My name is Corey Kupfer, and I've been supporting deal-driven growth for businesses for 35 years as a successful entrepreneur, professional negotiator, and attorney. My goal is to help you strategize, plan for, find, and complete deals that will help your company grow faster. Welcome to the DealQuest podcast. Let's get started. I am so excited to welcome Jessica Fialkovich, who was a first-time entrepreneur at the age of 25, and since then has established, developed, and sold multiple small businesses in a number of different industries. So she's done that as an entrepreneur. Now, in the last 8 years, she's been building a business brokerage firm from her two-person team to one of the top firms in the country. Under her leadership, the office has become the #1 Trans-World Business Advisors franchise location in the world for the last 5 years. So you'll hear more about Trans-World Business Advisors. Well, why don't we just say that? You'll hear more about them later. They've made the Inc. 5000 list for the last 3 years and been recognized by the Financial Times, the Denver Business Journal, and others. Jessica is also the founder of Exit Factor, which teaches business owners how to buy and sell businesses for the most profit in the least amount of time. That sounds pretty good, right? As an entrepreneur, Jessica is passionate about small business, driving our economy. We definitely have that in common. Because of this, she's committed to educating and supporting entrepreneurs and the small business community. She's active in Entrepreneurs Organization, near and dear to my heart, as listeners know. Currently serving as the president of the Colorado chapter, and having been New York president for 2 years, my condolences and heartfelt. All kidding aside, it's a tough but unbelievably rewarding job. She's the founder of the Small Business Coalition, a nonprofit giving small business support and a voice. Jessica's originally a Jersey girl who lives in Colorado now with her husband and 2 dogs, Moose and Sailor. I'm going to ask you what kind of dogs they are. When she's not working, you will find her either enjoying the outdoors or, like any good New Jersey girl, attending a Bruce Springsteen concert. So this is not usually my opening question, but since in the pre-show we talked a little bit about my dog and trying to figure out whether Macy's going to try to make an entrance. Tell me about what are your 2 dogs?
Yeah, so they're both rescues. Sailor is our 12-and-a-half-year-old. He is a Shiba Inu Canaan dog mix, which nobody's really familiar with, but he kind of looks like a black lab with a curly tail.
Okay.
And then we adopted Moose in 2019. He's 2 years old. He is a Beagle Staffy mix. And he's got like at least 20 times the amount of energy that Sailor ever has. So I joke around all the time. I was like, Sailor wasn't a real dog. And then we got Moose and we're like, oh, this is what people talk about with puppy training.
I love it. Well, not that I talk about it a lot, but some of the listeners and viewers may know my dog, Macy. I'm actually tempted to do, like, it would be very cool to do a podcast with like, people and the dogs,
Yeah.
Probably get way more downloads, than
of course, anything with dogs always will, right?
All right. Any case, so on to my usual first question. I'm going to take you back before we talk about all this great stuff that you're doing now to when you were a little girl growing up, 8, 10, 12 years old, maybe. What did you want to be? Because my guess is, business brokerage, what you're doing now probably wasn't on the list back then, but you tell me.
No, it wasn't at all. So I grew up in a small town in southern New Jersey on a horse farm. So I wanted to be a large animal veterinarian. And that was my dream until I was about 14 years old. And my horse at the time had to go in for surgery. And I saw my first drop of blood and almost fainted. And I was like, okay, this is not going to work. But yeah, for the very first 14 years, I wanted to be a large animal vet.
Cross that one off the list, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Who was it? I don't know. I have all these animal asides that are coming into my mind because there was an author I used to read a lot of who was like a large animal vet and used to write books on had stories about that. It was a phenomenal.
I don't know. We didn't read it, but like, fortunately, like where I grew up, the University of Pennsylvania has like one of the top large animal veterinarian schools in the country. So wow. My trainer used to take me there and I got exposed to all this stuff, which also, like I said, showed me that I could not complete that task because I don't like the sight of blood. So,
well, it's the same with me. My mother's, she's retired many years now, but she was a critical care and intensive care unit nurse. And I used to hate, like if I had to go pick up the car keys when I was a teenager from her or whatever, I used to hate going into hospitals. I didn't know how she did that work. All right. One other question looking back, we said in your bio that, your first company was when you were 25. Do you remember, it could be something small when you were a kid or later, whatever comes to mind. Do you remember what your first deal of any type was?
Yeah, I was thinking about this question because I know this is one of your opening questions, and I can't, like, I was trying to think about it. I can't really remember my first deal, but actually my first job was in sales, right? So I was thinking about like all those deals sales I was closing were actually, or deals, they were transactional. But I was a telemarketer for our local gym in our community. And okay. I started that when I was like 14 years old. And I was fairly good at it. It scared the hell out of me, but like I was very good at it. So I was able to close a few memberships before they moved me into more of a service role. But that was like my first real job in sales or positioning myself in that area.
Yeah. Got it. And listen, although we do make a distinction between sales and deals, some of the skills that you learn, in one relate to the other, right? Understanding what the other party wants and being able to present something powerfully and, all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, it's interesting. I've actually done some health club gym deals in my career, and I remember when the model changed from annual renewals to the monthly recurring, which a lot of people thought that was a stupid play because why are you letting people get out on 30 days notice when you used to lock them in for a year? And the health club industry understood something relatively early on that's become ubiquitous now, which is that recurring revenue, subscription revenue is worth a lot more. And actually, I think especially in the health club industry, they have a built-in advantage because if you don't have to actively renew, you have to admit to yourself you're never going to go to the gym again, and you don't want to do that, so you keep paying, right? But from a in the context of deals, from an enterprise value point of view, they've also made their business is more valuable because they had guaranteed recurring revenue, not only for a year, but for forever in theory. So
it was an interesting move. And if you think about it too, could have even reduced their overhead. Like the gym I worked at when we were at annual renewals, we'd actually have a sales team, right, to do all those annual renewals. And moving to monthly recurring revenue, especially with technology, you don't really need the sales team anymore, right?
Yeah, and it's amazing, like you think about it. And I've talked to some folks. I think we had Joel Block on the second time we had Joel on, which was, I don't know, a couple of months ago. he does this trend report, and he talked about, how, it's just a continuing trend to subscription, revenue. I mean, how many subscriptions, I don't even know what subscriptions I have, right?
I don't think I want to know how many subscriptions
right, exactly.
I have. I know my husband doesn't want to know how many subscriptions I have.
Exactly. Yeah. But, that's become such a model, and, and it definitely helps. I'm sure that you see that on the deal side as well in terms of the enterprise value.
Definitely. Number one thing that buyers request at this point, right, is what is the recurring revenue in the business?
Yep, totally. So let's start. So before we get into what you're doing now, before you got into the brokerage side, helping other people buy and sell businesses, you had some of your own businesses that actually did some deals on your own. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your personal history with starting and positioning companies for sale and selling them, and what went well and maybe some lessons you learned.
Yeah. So it was interesting. I started my first business in the middle of the recession in 2009. And my husband and I were both laid off from our jobs, thought we were given an opportunity when we were young, had low overhead to do what we wanted to do. Sure. And we kind of looked around the marketplace, and we had a few friends that made some good money in the wine industry. And we're like, if we can make good money in the wine industry and drink wine all day, that sounds great. So we opened a boutique wine shop and tasting bar in Naples, Florida.
Okay.
And and actually it was perfect timing. Like you hear all the time, it's a great time to start businesses in a recession or a down market. No question. So we were very quickly able to get into luxury wine dealing. So not just like, the yellowtail that you'll see at Total Wine, but we were selling bottles up to, I think our most expensive bottle we ever sold was $25,000 a bottle.
Nice.
So it was a great business. We did really well at it, but it also, we hit it at the right perfect time before this guy named that everybody knows, Gary V, really blew up in the market, and online wine buying had become like a thing. And when that happened and there was online sales, it just started crushing the margins. So we made the decision at that time to sell and also relocate to Colorado. It was a personal decision. And it was interesting because I asked my advisors, I asked my CPA, my accountants, and we were in a relatively small market in Florida, right? Southwest Florida. And they're like, so how do I sell a business like this? And they're like, I don't really know. And then my next question is like, do you have a broker, an investment banker, right, that can help me? And then there was only one guy, right? So there's one guy that was selling businesses at the time in Naples. And so we went through that brokerage process and we're able to sell our business. I look back down, I'm like, that was a great deal. We had it done in 60 days, all cash, only 2 weeks training and transition. So wow. Now I look at the deal and I'm like, wow, that was an easy.
You didn't realize
deal,
how good you had it.
Yeah. But we did most of it ourselves. Our broker wasn't that engaged, and it really taught me a lot about the process because I handled due diligence on my own, worked super closely with our attorney. And that's what opened my eyes into this whole other industry I didn't even know existed. I say a lot, like you see a lot of coaching programs, and even, through university and stuff, you're taught a lot about how to start a business, how to grow a business, but this third leg of the journey of how to exit, or, how you talk about even growing through acquisition and deals, nobody really talks about that. Yeah. So I just became intrigued in the whole process. And after we sold that business and a couple of our other holdings in the wine industry, we were able to start our business brokerage firm in Colorado.
Yeah. So, I want to go there, but before we go there, it triggers a few things to me, which are interesting. It's funny you say that, nobody teaches you, about the exit. It's true. The only situation where you hear it, and maybe you take some classes in school and learn about it, whatever, is funded companies, right, who are going to, exit by IPO or maybe by acquisition, they go through, you'll hear it in that context, but any company that's not, raising significant capital is going to be some, try to be some unicorn, right. I mean, you don't hear about that. And it's amazing because could be the single biggest asset that and often is that an entrepreneur has. And we're not taught how to create enterprise value, very often. I mean, we're so busy trying to figure out how to run the thing and keep it going and make payroll and, and make some money for ourselves. Right. So it's interesting. One other point, the wine business made me remember you're in those industries where I've done deals, but that's probably because I done deals in almost
Yeah.
in the industry. But a little shout out to my good buddy John DeQuilla. John is actually an accountant down in Florida. Now he's a New York guy originally, which is how I knew him. There's a great story I will not tell in detail right now, but we were actually introduced by a guy because he thought we looked like we could be brothers. That was the context in which we got introduced.
Of the introduction.
And we ended up becoming great friends. And John was over at Comstock, which was one of the top stock photography companies back in the day before Getty took everything over or whatever. And we did a deal to sell them to Jupiter Media for, I don't know, 22, 23 million. I could say that because it was the buy was public, so it was all public information. Yep. And John had exited and become a consultant from that company. He wasn't the owner there. But he had started a business, and this is back, I don't know, I could be way off, but it's got to be 20 years ago. He had started a business in the wine business, and he was one of the early online wine companies, and that was his whole concept. He was going to go online with wine. It was going to be, it was early in the internet. There weren't many people who were doing that. And the funny thing is that he called me up. And he said, "Hey, Corey, I need you to come with me to the hearing at the liquor board." And I'm like, "John, what are you talking about? I don't do that. I don't do that kind of work. I'm a deal guy, right?"
Yeah.
He says, no, just come with me. He says, it shouldn't be a problem. He said, in New York State at the time, there's a law, and there's all kinds of liquor laws around the country that are crazy.
Right.
He could not start an online business at that time without having a physical location. Yeah. Right? It was required for him to have a physical location. So he took a storefront in, I think it was Harrison, New York, or somewhere in Westchester, whatever. And he only took it to be able to have the online business. Well, some of the local, liquor stores objected to his license because they thought it'd be competition. We ended up going up to this hearing. I went with them. We explained to them how it's going to be an online play. We're not going to be competitive with any of these folks. We're only going to be doing wine. We're not going to be doing liquor. It's going to be whatever. And, got approved. My one and only time appearing before the liquor board. And John built this thing into an online thing. The funny part is, I feel a little bit about this, but it wasn't intentional, is that the other two stores ended up going out of business because John's retail business, just like, because he understood how to do it right. And, and it wasn't even his intention. But the funny part is when he came to me to sell that company and he ended up selling it, he said, everything looked good. It was a good deal, whatever. He said, you have any caveats to me? I said, yeah, you're crazy. Why would you sell this company? You get to go on free trips to Italy and to France and to, Chile and to, all these places, to taste wine. Like, what? I don't care how much money you're getting. Why are you selling this thing?
Yeah. Yeah. It was funny. When I sold, and my friends made fun of me. I'm like, I'm just, I'm so over just tasting wine all day. And we sold a lot out of California. So like we're in Napa all the time. And like, I was complaining about it. But it does get tiring. Right. And yeah, there's a real thing of palate fatigue and not wanting to drink wine at 10 a.m. in the morning, no matter like, how many points it has. So yeah.
Right. No, I hear you. That's real. Although I'm sure your friends were like, "Oh yeah, tough life."
I know that's pretty much what we got, but it was the right move for us. It was fun. While we had it, I still know way too much about wine. So that's always like, it's always I'm always the friend at dinner where like the wine menu comes and it gets passed to me. So that'll be a lifelong responsibility. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Me too. In fact, the rare times that I'm out with like my buddy John, or I've got a friend, Vito, who actually has a vineyard down in Temecula that is just about to produce, it takes a few years. So he bought a play, like those are the rare times where I will, relinquish the wine list duties, and I'm actually happy to have somebody else pick a bottle sometimes. Yeah. All right. Any case. So yes. Getting back to deals. So all right. So it's interesting because you sort of previewed a little bit, if people listened closely to your comments about your experience with the one business broker in Naples and the experience you had doing your own due diligence and, whatever. So yeah, talk to me about now evolving into the business brokerage side. And I will say that, one of the and I'll sort of throw you a softball of setting it up because of my experience, one of the challenges, to find quality, anything below the big deal investment banking level, to find quality advice and, and professionals on what are considered smaller and middle market deals is a challenge. So take us through what you're doing now, and sort of what brought you there and what you learned in that process of selling the wine business, and how you apply that to what you do now.
Yeah, it was a softball question. I appreciate it. But no, what I really learned through the process of selling our business, and then when we were doing some market research and investigating the business brokerage market, which to us really, like, we cap out around like 20 million in transactional value. So anything below 20 million is what we handle. But what I saw is that when you go to sell a business through a business broker versus when you go to sell a business through an investment banker, it's a very similar process, but you get a very different experience. Yeah. And so what I was really inspired to do is, like, how can we bring investment banking resources, advice, professionalism down to some of these smaller deals? Because kind of what you said, Corey, is that, when you sell a business, almost any business you sell is going to be that owner's one of their biggest financial assets that they part with in their lifetime. And what I found is, even on the smaller deals, sometimes that's even more relevant, right? So a lot of our clients that we're dealing with, they've spent a lot of their money, time, investment in their business, and this is their retirement, right? This is their one shot. And I really felt like that was so important, and we had to handle it with so much care, but we weren't seeing that in our competitors. Now I have to say, like, this is back, we started in 2013, the market's evolved, all that kind of stuff. Sure. But that was really where I started from, is how do we deliver investment banking level services for a small business? And that was really what led to our inspiration, how we've built our team. We've built more of like a team format. So instead of just having like solo brokers floating around, we have a whole back office staff, buyer reps, resources like attorneys like yourself that we're partnering with. But it really started there. And it was primarily driven by my primary experience, my own personal experience through the deal.
Yeah. And that's fascinating. So, I mean, not to ask you to give away any secret sauce or whatever, but the word on why it's difficult to get that level of service and professionalism, et cetera, on the smaller deal level is that it's not as lucrative, right? I mean, obviously, if you're taking a percentage of a $200 million deal versus a $20 million deal, it's a much bigger number. Although in practice, usually the percentages do scale down, but still, you're still getting a piece of the bigger numbers. So that's been the challenge, right? So how does one truly professionalize at a smaller deal level and have it be success? I mean, you're very successful. Your business is profitable. You make, So again, without secret sauce, like how do you do that in a way that makes sense?
And I mean, it's a lot of the stuff like we're taught through Entrepreneurs Organization too, right? But we have to be a very process oriented business. Yes. And we do a lot more deals than investment bankers would do. So last year we closed close to 100 deals. Wow. And, over just about 22 brokers, right? So, but in order to do that kind of scale, like we have to have a lot of processes and systems. That's not to say like every person that we deal with or every business isn't treated like a client and have it given like a customary experience. But in our back office, we're very process oriented, like how we list deals for sale. What's our marketing strategy? How do we go to market? And then the back office side of us having like an actual back office admin team that's providing a lot of the support to the brokers allows them to do more deals, right? And actually as an entrepreneur, I kind of like that, right? When I look at, and know this, but deals can blow up at any time for any reason, for any number of reasons. Okay. And in the deal world, we really don't get paid until the deal closes, or at least we don't get the bulk of our paycheck till the deal closes. So if we're spreading the risk out over those deals, over 100 deals versus 10 or 15, it's actually better as a business model for us, at least, that our risk is more diversified. So.
Now, when you started doing the business brokerage, did you start being a franchisee of Transworld Business Advisors?
Yeah, we actually did. Okay. So there was a defunct office in Colorado, specifically in downtown Denver. So we acquired that one office, and then we grew by acquisition. So we started with one franchise location. We grew by acquisition, buying out other franchise owners in Colorado. And then in 2020, we actually expanded to both Dallas and Vegas through acquisition as well.
Right.
But yeah, we were introduced to Transworld. That was not the broker we sold through when we sold our company, but the CEO, Andy Cagnetta, it was funny. We grew up in a similar town in South Jersey. We had the East Coast thing going on. We really agreed where the direction that we thought that the industry was going. And for us, it was a win-win there. You see a lot in the deal world too now that, to get deals done, especially in our size, efficiently, process-oriented, you have to have a big buyer database. You have to have like a really big pool of resources, and working together with other offices across the country has been way more beneficial to us than trying to go it alone in our small markets.
Yeah, it totally makes sense. And some of that back office support you providing, is that provided at the franchisor level, or that's what I think, because obviously because of the scale that they have with the franchisees, they can it's easy to systemize. Then, I mean, obviously you've grown significantly through acquisitions. You've gotten to a level of scale yourself, but certainly in the beginning, and for some of the other franchisees who I'm sure are smaller than you, it would be difficult for them probably to create the level of systems that you benefit from, if not being part of the franchise system.
Yeah, so definitely. I mean, it definitely has helped us a lot. It helps smaller offices. It helps us scale faster. We're in our 9th year now, and I don't think we would be at this place if we had started a solo practice on our own. We just grew a lot faster because of the support and the back office systems that the franchise had in place, and also the expertise, right? So we have over 600 brokers in our network. I have somebody that I can call that's an expert in every single industry, right? So we got a deal today. It's something to do with like gas distribution, but like not oil and gas, like helium and hydrogen, right?
Okay.
Don't run into those quite often, but I'm sure there's someone in my network that's done a deal like that before, right?
Right. Which is an amazing resource. That's phenomenal. And it's interesting because you have, you say that they've helped you grow. They've helped, and it's been in two ways, right? Number one is organic growth, right? By being part of a system, marketing, getting you, I'm sure they help get clients. But then also you said you've done a number of deals and they've all been within the franchise system, right? So, they've also, you've had those connections and be able to acquire existing franchises in Colorado and in other locations, right?
Yeah, it's interesting too. And as we became this more larger franchisee, we got introduced to other entrepreneurs that have a similar strategy. I have a friend that does this strategy in Meineke brands, right? And it's interesting because once you understand how to operate not just one industry, but a business within that industry, and then you have a built-in network, there's deal flow that comes to you. And if you're lucky enough to rise to the top of the franchise performers too, those deals come to you for usually starts as like advice, right? But there could come opportunities there to expand as well. We've tried to be really thoughtful and going into markets we thought were developing and growing, but also markets we like to be in. I mean, at the end of the day, if we're working with small business owners, we've got to have some face-to-face time, even in this day and age. So we've been personally strategic like that too, is like, let's go to a market we like to travel to and be in, and not just pick some random market we're never going to go to. So
totally makes sense. And you said Dallas?
Dallas, yeah. So we're in Dallas and Fort Worth. Yep.
Yes. It's interesting to me because I had traveled to Dallas forever ago on business in the 80s and all this kind of stuff, whatever. And then I hadn't been to Dallas for 15, 20 years or something. And then about maybe 8-10 years ago, I went back and then somehow found myself there a lot for a period of years. You know how that happens sometimes where you just, and I was amazed, like Dallas totally had, I know a lot of areas change, develop, whatever, but when you haven't been there for a while. And I remember I went out there for the first time because we had good friends from New York so my wife comes out, although my wife's an entrepreneur now and runs a very successful coaching and training company for socially conscious entrepreneurs, does occasionally. And we have a lot of friends in the arts. And we had some real sort of New York, folks who came out of, hip hop and hip hop theater festival and things like this or whatever. who were moving to Dallas. And we were like, and it was sort of like a disconnect for me. And it was my own issue with not, sort of having a perception, right, of Dallas. They built, the whole downtown arts, area, all kinds of money went into that. They've really actively pursued diverse, drawing diverse folks to the various universities and to the theater companies and to, that kind of stuff. So, yeah, it's really interesting, and you, I'm sure know more than I do on the business side, but, and there's certainly money there, that's for sure. So, it's been interesting for me to see personally, at least how Dallas has evolved.
Yeah, it's a really interesting market. And like, look, there's a lot of people and businesses moving to Texas for like financial reasons, for tax reasons, whatever. Yeah. But what's interesting to me about it as a market is it's also, and Colorado was able to do this too. And I see a lot of similarities between the two markets. Dallas has also been able to maintain its small business mindset, right? Mm-hmm. So there's still tons of small businesses there, a great community, great entrepreneurial community. So you've got the flash of downtown and all the money that's influxing, but the city as its backbone is still a very small business entrepreneurial based community, which is what I love about it. We talked about that's like part of my passion. It's our target market, but it's also what I love to be in. It's the community I want to be part of. So
yeah. I mean, listen, we both we talked about EO Entrepreneurs Organization, and it's like, yeah, it's my people, and that's who my clients are as well. Yep. Right. It's the same thing, So, yeah, I love hanging out with entrepreneurs, people who are building something and people who are founders. I mean, listen, I have some bigger clients. We deal with their executives, whatever. I love that too. Appreciate them. But, there's something about that entrepreneurial energy and vision and certainly helping them grow and helping them exit is fun, because I always say it's not, it affects where they live, where the kids go to college and how they retire and what causes they can support with the, with the money they have and, all this stuff that is like real,
Yeah. Very real. Yeah.
Good stuff. Let's take a break from the show for a minute so I can invite you to a new way to determine your deal readiness. I created a fast and easy assessment that will determine exactly how deal ready you are. Once you complete the assessment, I use your responses to identify the obstacles that are holding you back from being a deal-driven growth genius. It's as easy as heading to CoreyKupfer.com/assessment. That's CoreyKupfer.com/assessment and filling out a few multiple choice questions. I'll be checking in after the episode to see what your results are. Now back to the show. So let's talk about the market generally. I mean, the experience in the areas that we deal in is that, there's a ridiculous amount of capital out there. Feels crazy right now, et cetera, et cetera. You and I both talked before we went on air about how busy we both are. Talk to us generally about what you're seeing. And then also maybe because you are in a few different markets, do you see differences in those different geographies?
Yeah. Yeah, it's really interesting, like how I look at the market for sale right now in small businesses. I call it the tale of two markets, right? So part of our business is we do a lot of restaurant, retail, brick and mortar, right? And we've got that market right now that's really struggled through the pandemic, different restrictions, and they've been fortunate enough to get through that with some of the incentives we've seen come out through the federal and state government programs. But when we can go to sell those businesses, it's a low multiple, right? And because of the performance over the last 18 months. So that's really a buyer's market, right? So there's tons of opportunity for buyers right now to pick up second locations, third locations, or even get into an industry, a very, very low entry point. Especially restaurants, you're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars to use it to build something out. And right now you can pick up a restaurant for $50,000, right? Yeah. So it's crazy. So that's the one side of the market. And then the other side of the market is the businesses and the industries that were stable through the pandemic or even did well. And we've seen a lot of businesses that did well. And that's a seller's market, especially on some of our larger size deals. We've seen, like you mentioned, Corey, there's a lot of money out there, right? So we've seen a lot of money chasing those deals, and the sellers have a pick of a number of different offers. It's also been an interesting place in the last 18 months that lending has been, I don't want to call it easy because it's never easy, right? But lending's available, right? So there's so much money, whether it's on the private equity side or the debt side, that a lot of these sellers are walking away with very significant chunks of cash in their pockets from the closing table instead of doing a big portion of earnouts or seller financing.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting because we're managing like the two opposite ends of the spectrum. And it's hard for us some days because it's very clear to us the winners and losers from this pandemic in terms of industry. So, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, listeners of, and viewers of DealQuest are probably getting tired of me using this K economy, phrase, but it's exactly what you're describing. And it's what I believe in. That's one of the ways they're describing it, where, there are businesses that are on the upswing, the upstroke of the K through the pandemic, and some on the downstroke. And, you're right. I mean, restaurants and retail, and I have some of those clients, but my biggest two sectors, financial services and tech. Are you kidding me? I mean, they're, they couldn't have been doing better, So, then obviously you have stuff in between, but a lot of logistics companies did really well as well, So, it's really interesting. But, it also shows one of the things that I always say, which is in any challenging time, any changing time, whatever, there's always opportunities. It's just a matter of what side it's on. Right?
Yeah.
You're talking about, there are buyer opportunities, in some segments, and there are seller opportunities in others, which is kind of interesting at this time.
And I mean, I'm sure you've seen this too, even within the industries too. Like construction and trades are a big segment of our business, and in our markets, they've killed it. I mean, you can't even count the number of cranes, right, in these markets anymore. Right. So, but it's interesting too, because you've really seen the operational differences in businesses. Because we could have one roofing company that's killing it, and we have buyers knocking down the door for it, and then we could have the same exact business that was just managed differently, yes. And it's harder to sell. So, yeah,
that's right. Very what's the word? Very. You're being an ambassador. Very nice of you to call it managed differently.
Yeah. Yes. I'm playing the party line. Yes. Yeah. But in terms of your question of like different markets and stuff, we haven't seen like geographically that different. There's definitely some markets that are more active than others. And in our three, we're actually very fortunate that, Colorado, Vegas, and Dallas are very fast developing markets. Yep. Mainly goes back to the demographics too. They're all areas where we're having a net migration increase, right? So we're having more people come in than leave right now. And that's the same for businesses. And I mean, that won't hold true forever, right? But for right now, sitting in three markets that have that net positive migration is very helpful for our industry and for all business really in the community.
No question about it. And, it's interesting. I want to sort of go back, I joked a little bit about this managed differently conversation. But but it really does. I mean, certainly on the in the industries where it's more challenging. Mm-hmm. I had it always bothers me, and I don't remember who this was, but many years ago, I went to some seminar, and there were like 4 billionaires being interviewed about their journey, right? And one of them, and they all had had declared bankruptcy, or they had this issue, whatever, and then they asked one of the guys, what was your biggest mistake, and he said a quote which I love, which is he said, I mistook a bull market for brilliance. Right? Which I thought was such a great line. And it's sort of the corollary of that is that, as a business owner, as an entrepreneur, it's easy. It's never easy to be successful. Tough road entrepreneur. But let's say a good economy can cover up a lot of sins, right? Yep. And when things get more challenging, a lot of times these businesses, like the flaws, the excess expenses, the bad management, the turnover of employees, whatever it is that is a challenge for them, which maybe they've been able to cover up by the fact that it's been a boom market, start to really show themselves. So I think your point on that it's not just by industry, but within industry is a really important one.
Yeah. Well, and it's very important, if you think about it in terms of the economy and how it's, as an owner, it's going to affect your bottom line. But the other area I see this a lot in is in deals, right? So in deals, and you've been through this way too many times, but when you get into due diligence, that's when all the warts come out, right? Yeah. And it doesn't matter if you're in a good economy, bad economy, the buyer really looks at how that operational structure is designed. And a lot of people ask me like, well, how do I increase the valuation of my business? How do I get more money? And there is a quantitative factor, right? You make more money, your EBITDA is higher, you get a higher valuation. But there's also like this qualitative factor. And we talked a little bit about recurring revenue and how that's valued, but it's also like the quality of the business. Yes. And the operationals and more. And I think this is because, we're not as in a stable economy as we were a few years ago. We get questions from buyers like, how did the owner handle the pandemic? How did the owner handle the 2008 through 2010 crisis, right? Like we want to see, and it's not just buyers, it's bankers and financiers too, which is, you gotta impress the money guys too, right? So 100%. Yeah, but I see that a lot in due diligence is that's where, the playing field is equaled and it really, that's where the investigation begins about how the company is run.
Yeah. That's super important. And, one of the things I talk about sometimes as well is that it's actually actual due diligence, but there's also, perception, right?
Right.
And so the way you present yourself makes a big difference. If you seem like you're on top of stuff, things are organized, you're not missing addendums to your contracts, because, one of the things I try to explain to my clients sometimes is that you have to understand sometimes, depending on who the buyer is, right? Usually there are people that come in, internal folks, financial folks, legal folks, operational folks who come in and they're employees, right, of the buyer, right?
Yep.
And it may be the founder or the board or the executives who decided to do this, but the people who come in and doing the due diligence are folks that are looking for problems because they have more risk if they actually have less risk if the deal doesn't go through. Right. They have more risk if the deal goes through and they've missed something, right? Or there's a problem that comes up afterwards. That's when their job is on the line. That's when they're going to look bad, right? Yeah. So you got to understand the mentality of some of the folks doing the due diligence. So you want to make them feel comfortable. So I always take, and I'm sure you work with your clients as well. I take my clients through a pre-due diligence process, right. And any good broker banker is going to, I work with them to do the same thing, right? Because you want to sort of take them through the process that they're going to go through so that when it comes down to the actual due diligence, you've caught everything. That's, that's an issue, right?
Yeah. I mean, the buyers, like we always say, like, just to your point, the buyer's looking for red flags, right? It might not necessarily about like this red flag, right? But it's like a what else thing. One of the stories I tell a lot that's just like funny, but simplistic. We were selling a manufacturing company, great company. Like really everything was buttoned down. Their books and records look good. Great. But the first tour with the buyer, we're driving up to their facility and we pull down the driveway and there's like an old washer to one side. There's like, a dryer to the other side. And we get up to the front door and there's like a commercial kitchen sink right outside the front door. And the buyer's like, oh no, I don't think I can do this. Right. And it's like, like I said, it was a great company, stable, long-term, like 20, 30 years in business. But the perception was like, they literally have their trash in their front yard. Like what else is wrong in the business? Is that one red flag that starts to spark those questions and like, what other risks do I have? Right.
Yeah. Where there's smoke, they think there's fire, right?
Right.
So no,
so the lesson of that story is, remove your commercial sinks from your front door before you sell.
Right. Or whatever the equivalent of that is, right? That could be that could be messy financials. That could be not having signed renewals on your contracts. That could be
all kinds of numbers of things. Yes. Yeah.
Right. Let's talk a little bit about, because, it's easy to also think that deals are all about numbers or even due diligence, legal, financial due diligence. Let's talk a little bit about personality. Let's talk about entrepreneurs. Let's talk about ego. Let's talk about some of that stuff. Like what do you find, like, what gets in the way of deals sometimes, my guess is knowing what you do, you like I are, and I don't mean this truly in a professional license way, but, you're half a therapist, sometimes as well, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's super interesting because I think by nature of a deal, you're in a room with a lot of egos, right? A lot of business owners and entrepreneurs have large egos, or like we use the DISC scale a lot, like they're high Ds, like they're demanding personalities. And that's what's gotten them to the level of success that's been there.
Right.
And then you have the same on the buy side, right? Because you have somebody coming in, whether they're an experienced buyer or not, they have someone coming in that feels that they can take the business to the next level. And they're going to see, like we talked about, all the warts and how to take advantage of these warts and the opportunity and all of that stuff. So we do a lot of coaching with our clients, but one thing like I think is really important to communicate, especially on the sell side, right? Because the buyer does point out a lot of different things that could be done differently and better, right? And sometimes the sellers take that a little bit too personally. So we always say you can either be right or you can get what you want. And we explain that it was like, you know, you don't have to be right in every single conversation, every single negotiation. If you want to get what you want, which is out of the business. It's the same thing for the buyer, right? But it is, I think that's the hardest part of our job, is balancing the personalities and the culture. I mean, I do have to say there are deals that do not go through and should not go through because of personality and culture differences. I mean, you know, these are short-term marriages. They're long deal processes. There's usually a transition process. So like the people actually do have to get along to move the business from one hand to another.
Yeah. Yeah. No question about it. You know, that's always the interesting and sometimes, you know, challenging, right? Part of what we do often. Okay. So before I ask you my final two questions, just, you know, and I know this is still a high level, but give me two or three sort of biggest mistakes people make, you know, in deals, and or two or three, I don't know if you want to do both or the other side of it, like best practices. Yeah.
I think they're kind of tied together. So like my first one, it's so boring. And I always hate that this is my first one, but it's financials and financial cleanliness. So the biggest mistake side would be, I really think it's not understanding the importance of the financial records going into a deal process. And this is both on the buy or the sell side, right? Because your financials are going to be investigated on the sell side by the buyer, the financiers, things like that. And on the buy side, if you're trying to get money, you're trying to raise money, you're trying to borrow money, it's the same thing. And I do believe, you know, deals start with books and records and they end with books and records. So that's like my caution tale. The easy way to do it is like, you know, just make sure you're working with your bookkeepers and your accountants to make sure all your books and records are tied together, at least for the last 3 years, or however long you've been in business. It's been the last three. The other thing, and I see this a lot, is that, and this goes back to your ego question, right? Is that no one wants to see that a business is tied to the individual owner, right? When somebody comes and say they wanted to buy my business, they don't want the risk that everyone's just doing business with Transroll because they like Jess, right? It just goes away eventually. And that's a really scary situation. And I see sometimes that owners actually overplay the importance of their role in the business. This comes down to even like things like the pre-due diligence checklist you were talking about. Like we do things like, what does your About Us section look like on your webpage, right? Is it like, you know, is it about Jess, or is it about the team, right? And about the business. And so I think the more you can downplay your ownership role in preparation for a sale, and it's good messaging for buyers too, right? Because we talked about buyers come in with some of that ego too. Think about like, how do you position yourself in that company? So you're not going to put yourself in that same pigeonholed role that the company is based on you in preparation for your future exit, which will happen at some point in your life, you know? Those are my two biggest things. If people are like, hey, what can I do today? I'll give one on the buy side too. And it was funny. I was listening to one of your solo casts, you're going through your top 5, there's gonna be top 10 things if you're thinking about acquisition. And one thing that I totally agree with you on, and I tell all of our buyers, is be very specific on what you're looking for, right? So why are you looking for a company? Who are you targeting? You know, what are you targeting and where? Because we get a lot of buyers that come to us and they say, hey, I'm just looking for a good, profitable company that's growing. And I'm like, I don't know where to go with that.
Right.
You know, there is, I mean, it's not a large market, but there's thousands of businesses for sale at any given moment on the market. That's just on like listed for sale. And there's other opportunities, obviously, that are unlisted. So the more specific you can be, I think, you can really fast track your timeline to acquisition, and reduce your time waste too, and vetting through deals that just aren't going to be a fit.
Yeah. Which is a big thing, because listen, we both know, especially for companies that are, listen, we have some clients that do a lot of acquisitions, and they have team and they have systems and they have, but certainly for buyers who are, and even for sellers, I mean, it could be such a distraction to your core business, dealing with potential deals. And when they don't go through, I've seen businesses make the mistake of actually hurting their business while going through that process, and then becoming less valuable, right? Because, so that's a challenge.
Yeah, it's a challenge. I mean, we just closed on another acquisition in Dallas, Fort Worth. And I'm fortunate at this point, like that's, besides doing podcasts and hanging out with cool people like you, that's like my main role right now. But I just spent the last 60 days exclusively working on that deal, right? That was my full-time job for 60 days. So it does, and it wasn't a big deal, but it's a lot of work, right?
Yeah. That's great. Okay. So I could talk to you forever. We could talk deals for hours and hours, but I don't have a 3-hour podcast. So we're going to, before I ask you my final question, I know that people are going to want to know more about you and what you do. So what's the best place for them to go to get more information?
Yeah, you can go to my website, which is jessicafialkovich.com. It's Fialkovich. That'll take you to my Transroll business, Exit Factor, my social media profiles. I'm most active on LinkedIn if anyone's looking for me on social.
Love it. You know what? I lied. It's not, because we haven't talked. Just give a few sentences on Exit Factor, because I mentioned it in the bio, but we didn't talk about it. I want to give you an opportunity to tell us what that is.
Thank you. Yeah. So Exit Factor, we developed after we just saw a lot of people that weren't educated, going back to the first part of you never have this education. So Exit Factor is an educational and training company. So on the sell side, our primary course offering and consulting offering is called Prep to Sell. And it gets business owners ready to sell their business in 1 to 2 years, increasing the value of the business and the likelihood it will sell. Right. And then on the buy side, we have a business buying 101 course. So it's 6 weeks. It's like a boot camp version, but if you've never bought a business before, we walk through everything about how to search for deals, what professionals you need, how to value businesses, where to get money, all that kind of stuff.
Love it. So I'm glad I asked you that question, because that's such a great resource for people. It's sort of, along the same lines of why I even do this podcast, just to get information out there for folks who, haven't done deals and want to learn how to do them, whether it's buy side, sell side, and just get a feel for it. So I appreciate you providing that resource to the market. It's well needed.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So my final question, as you must know because you listen to some episodes, is freedom is my highest ideal in life, and that's everything from freedom from oppression from all people around the world to the reason I'm an entrepreneur and I haven't had a boss in 30 years. So what does freedom mean to you, and how does it apply in your life and business?
Yeah. Freedom is one of my big personal core values. That's probably why we get along so well. I don't think I could ever go back and work for somebody else. On a very, I'd say, joking perspective, when I look at freedom for me, it's my ability to go to as many Bruce Springsteen shows as I possibly can in a year and still work. But really my definition of freedom is being able to work when I want, where I want, and doing what I want. So that's how I've designed my life, my company. Now, obviously we have commitments and things like that. We all do. But as long as I can stay in that box where I'm feeling like I'm doing what I want and when I want and where I want it, I'm happy.
I love it.
And going to as many Springsteen shows as I can.
I love that you have that other metric. For me, because I feel the same way, right? I want to work with who I want to work with. I want to do it. But my sort of, ultimate one, right, which I have not quite achieved yet, is my ultimate freedom would be never to have to set an alarm again.
Well, yeah, that's a good
And by
one.
the way, I'm not one of these people who automatically wakes up. I know there are people like that who wake up 6 a.m. every day. They don't need an alarm. I'm not talking about you people. I'm talking about people like me who actually need, use an alarm to wake up. If I never had to set an alarm again in my life, that would be and it doesn't mean I wouldn't be working. I just would be totally working whenever I want.
I know. Yeah. One of my idols is a family friend. He's a cardiologist. And he just speaks and teaches now. And when Bruce tours, he schedules all of his speeches around the tour schedule. And he hits almost all of the North American shows. And I was like, that's freedom to me. right?
I love it. I love it. Oh, what a good way. And Jessica, thank you so much for being an amazing guest on the DealQuest podcast.
Thank you for having me, Corey. I really enjoyed being here.
Thank you for joining me on this episode of DealQuest, where we help you understand how deal-driven growth can be your ticket to freedom. I want to invite you to a unique way to tap into the wisdom and experience of the DealQuest community. Join the DealQuest Deal Den Zoom calls, a free monthly 90-minute mastermind. In the mastermind, we address all the challenges you may be facing and help support you with the opportunities that may arise in terms of deal-driven growth. You will get input not only from me, but all the members on the call will collaborate and serve each other in a mastermind format. To sign up for the free mastermind, go to www.coreykupfer.com/dealden. That's coreykupfer.com/dealden. I'll see you there. I'm Corey Kupfer. Until next week, wishing you the freedom and financial prosperity that I know your DealQuest will bring.